This is Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. An informal chats with top business moguls as they share their stories of failure and success in a fun and relaxed way. Get entertained, educated, and unlock the secrets to success.
Welcome to Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman. I have a good friend and guest returning to us, Bill Pasha, who's the president and managing partner at the MBMI Companies. Bill, we ran out of time the last conversation, and I had so many more questions to ask you, and we never got to it. What you've done from an experience perspective is incredible. Your business experience across the country is incredible. Welcome back.
Well, thank you very much. It's very nice to be invited back. I think that this is the first time I've had a second date in about 50 years.
Well, speaking of which, you've been married for a really long time. I think you just celebrated an anniversary.
Yeah, we just celebrated our 39th anniversary. We dated 5 years before that. I'm sure that by now she's probably out looking for a replacement, but it's going to be tough because she's also my partner in the company, and I think I have her under contract.
Oh, that's great. Well, congratulations. No, we spoke about contracts. Now, does she have one of those fancy clauses like you have where you have to pay her if she leaves you?
She has a non-compete clause. That's the only thing I'll tell you. She has a non-compete.
When we ended our last program, you spoke to us about your virtual assistant and fractional marketing officer roles within what you do from a business perspective. Tell us again what the MBMI Companies is, just in general, because you work very strategically with companies on their marketing platforms and branding. And then tell us about this virtual assistant and fractional marketing category.
Well, as businesses try to grow and scale, in this economic environment, it can be very expensive first to recruit. The recruiting process alone is very expensive. It can also be a potential liability. Ask the wrong question, you might have some liability in the interview process. So it makes sense from those two perspectives, and just from a cost perspective, that when it is possible, if you can find the right kind of skills and talent to outsource, we have found that it is one of the best things that a company can do to accelerate their growth. We do it. We go out and we find some of the best designers to design some of our artwork because I can't afford to hire those top designers into my company. They could cost me $180,000, $200,000 a year. I can provide enough work that those who are working, if you will, inside the gig economy, they say, hey, you know what? Great. These guys will provide me enough work for, $60,000 or $70,000 a year. And I spread that over a couple, 3 people. Suddenly now I have 3 different visions and 3 different designs. It just benefits my clients. So I outsource some of that stuff. About 7 or 8 years ago, I had an alcohol retailer. He's a prominent alcohol retailer, one of the best independents in the country. And he and I were talking, because we've become friends over the years, about what his business really needed to go on to the next step. And what he really needed is not just a retailer, but as a developer and a integral member of his community, what he needed to develop personally and business-wise. He said, I really need somebody who can help keep me organized, who can do some of my ghost writing, who can write memos for me. And he said, some of it is fairly sensitive stuff that I don't necessarily know that I would want my retail employees to know about my development efforts and vice versa. And so we said, well, maybe we could do that for you. And the next thing we knew, we had added that service on to what we were doing for marketing for him. We have done that in the case of a med tech CEO. Right. We've done it for attorneys. We've done it for a number of companies. Sometimes it's long-term. Right. Sometimes it's not. And often it's related to other things. For instance, they might come to us and say, we're trying to raise $5 million for our company. Can you help? The answer is yes, we can help you market to the right people who might want to invest, but we need to know so much about your company. And in the course of learning about it, we find that we can help them from an operational standpoint as a fractional support unit.
Right.
The same holds true for marketing. At the minimum today, if you have any decent-sized business and you want someone who knows what they're doing, you're going to be paying, at least $65,000 a year,
Right.
a minimum, and that's for an entry-level person. A company,
And that's so true.
Yeah. A company like ours, and there are many of us, but a company like ours can bring years of experience, vast skill, and access to both the people and the products and the software, whatever it takes, the analytical skills to do your marketing at half of the cost of whatever level of person you were going to bring in.
Right.
If you want really accelerated marketing and you were going to pay somebody $120,000, chances are companies like ours can do it for $60,000.
Right.
If you were going to bring in somebody for $60,000, those level of services, you can probably do it for $30,000. The level of involvement that a fractional anything has is dictated by the owner of the business or the department head that's employing. And I have found that when you find the right partner, I really believe that long-term you are putting your company in a better position for growth. And if you do bring in someone, they have a constant mentor, because then a company like ours has the job of building in its own obsolescence and teaching that individual. If they come in trying to hit the ground running, your business is going to suffer.
And Bill, it's a different model than just hiring a marketing agency where you have either a fixed price or per hour price per se, because you are actually integrating yourself as a part of their business as if you are an employee. And that's a different model, which is great. The fractional model happens with CFOs and HR people as well. And one of the things you mentioned is the expense. That recruiting a person in a decent role, whether it's a junior level role or an executive, is very expensive. So just the lesson for entrepreneurs, if you're engaging with a recruiting agency, you can have a contingent search or retained search. And then when the person is hired, you're either paying a percentage of their base as a fee, so that can range from 35 to 55% on their base, or 35 to 50% of their total compensation, depending on what you negotiate. And then you have to buy all the tools they need that you mentioned, so the different software components that they might need in order to do what you do. And for you, all of that comes with your package to them, your partnership.
That's absolutely 100% factual. And we believe that if an owner of a business has my cell phone or one of the people's cell phones that he's dealing with on a daily basis, and we do deal with most of our clients at least every other day, our job is to become part of that fabric.
Right.
Our part is to know that company so well that after maybe 90 days of working with them intensively, we can mirror what their own people would do.
Right.
And sometimes improve upon that, because, it's the old consultant joke about, if you've stolen it from me, you've stolen it twice. Give me your wristwatch and I'll tell you what time it is. All those jokes are true. So I can tell you about something that is trending in London that hasn't even been exposed yet in Dallas, or vice versa. Our business in the U.S. is obviously Dallas-centric because we're based at the Cowboys World Headquarters, the Dallas Cowboys World Headquarters. But we do business around the world, which exposes us to huge numbers of opinions, different trends, what works, what doesn't work, and I think even different sensibilities. And depending on what your business does, having a sense of differing sensibilities
Right.
can make the difference between, doing $100,000 this year and doing $1 million this year.
And Bill, this wasn't on my list of thoughts or questions, but you pointed out something that I think is worth noting. You're based in Texas, but you work internationally.
We do.
I don't think people look at Dallas, Texas and think this is an international hub like they might LA or New York or maybe even Atlanta or Charlotte now. But Dallas is an international hub. The state of Texas has more Fortune 500 companies based here than any other state in the U.S.
It's an interesting perception, and I get where you're coming from. I will tell you that in my travels, which certainly are probably not as extensive as your own, but in my travels overseas, dealing with some of the people that we deal with who are often well-placed in international companies, they will tell you that it is well known that Texas is the nation's the world's seventh or eighth largest economy, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
Imagine that. Texas is, say, the eighth largest economy in the world.
It's amazing.
But more in particular, where we're located in Frisco, Texas, which is about 26 miles north of Dallas, which today is the home of the Dallas Cowboys, the most valuable sports franchise anywhere in the world.
Amazing.
Every major league sport is in one way or another represented in Frisco, Texas.
Right.
We have 1 mile of highway that originally had $5 billion worth of development, and now even more. Just yesterday, I was talking to the head of a very large investment fund in Europe. And he said to me, my window faces out onto the Dallas Cowboys World Headquarters complex. And he said, you could see the screen behind me, is that a background or are you really at somewhere with a football team? And I said, this is the Dallas Cowboys World Headquarters. And he said, you're in Frisco, Texas?
Wow.
And I said, I am. And he said, I have fear of missing out in Frisco, Texas.
Interesting.
And I said, in what way? He said, anybody that is moving a company has to look at Frisco now. So they're looking at Dallas now. They're looking at Texas now. This is the hub of growth in the United States right now. And maybe I'm being parochial, but when you look at some of the companies, Universal Studios,
they're moving here.
The Dallas Cowboys,
FC Dallas, which is owned by the Hunt family, which owns the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right? I mean, it goes on, and it's not just sports. There are med tech companies, insurance
Texas Instruments,
companies,
incredible.
you name it.
Right.
It's in Frisco. The PGA,
right?
America just moved here, right? And it is an amazing city with amazing leadership. And yes, I'm a cheerleader.
I love it.
Yeah.
Now, in our last program, you spoke about getting your start pretty early on as a young DJ.
Yeah.
Now, when you transition into adulthood, you turn 18, you finish high school, what happened next, and how did you get into radio programming? Because you were a programming director at one of the largest radio programs in the country.
Podcasts are so popular, even monkeys are doing it.
75% of Americans listen to podcasts monthly. That's 210 million people in the United States alone. And yes, podcasts are profitable. Joe Rogan is making $30 million per year. Your content, your knowledge is worth sharing. Don't just dream it, do it. Visit andycostafilms.com/podcast and turn your content into leaks.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And there's a gentleman, his name is Bob Curley, and no doubt Bob Curley will listen to this podcast. He was the general manager of a little broadcast facility in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, Canada. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, but my dad was an executive with Scott Paper, and we were transferred to Nova Scotia when I was 9 years old. And when I was 13, Bob hired me. When I was 17, I walked into the studios one day to do my evening show, and I couldn't find the program director. And I stuck my head in, and I said to Bob, "Hey, where's Bob Partington?" And he said he left. I said, "Well, can I be the program director?" And the next thing I knew, I was on my pathway to become a program director.
Interesting. So he left not for lunch or anything.
He left, yeah. But I was on my way to becoming a program director. And I was very lucky. By the time I was, I guess by the time I was 21, I was the vice president of promotion and programming for a small radio company called Wilboco.
By the time you were 21?
Yeah.
Wow.
For Wilboco Incorporated, they were based in Siler City in the Carolinas, which was the town on which Mayberry was based.
Okay.
I was working for them in Maine, in New England.
So I spent time in Mount Airy.
Ah, well, there you go. It was right
Yeah,
next to it.
right.
So you know what I'm talking about. And at any rate, I was very fortunate. By the time I was 19, I was a program director. I was going to school. I was still playing sports a lot. But the radio thing sort of stuck. The TV thing, not so much, although I did do some television weather in New England. I did some minor anchoring for news. But I really loved the radio thing. And shortly thereafter, in 1981, I received a telephone call from a gentleman named Toby Arnold, who ran Toby Arnold Associates here in Dallas. It was one of the big jingle syndication companies. They did commercial jingles, radio jingles. He was legendary. He was one of the guys that came up with some of the most legendary jingles that you've ever heard. And he said, "Billy, this is Toby Arnold down here in Dallas." I said, what can I do for you? He said, "I think you all get on an airplane and come and work for me." And I said, "Well, I'll certainly get on the airplane." I flew down, and I was really young. And he said, "I think you should come here and work at my syndication company. And I have this little 24-hour-a-day format called Unforgettable." And it was much like Music of Your Life. It was actually developed by one of the same people that developed Music of Your Life. And it was Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra and Nana Muscuri and big band. And I'm 21 years old. And I said, "Yeah, I'm there." So I moved to Texas, and I worked for him for a very long time. And one day, an old friend of mine, Rick Peters, who at the time was the vice president of programming for TK Broadcasting, which owned KLUV here in Dallas.
Okay.
Before it was KLUV, it was KLVU. And he said, "Hey, it's a big secret, but I'm going to change the radio station in Dallas to Oldies," which was a new format at that point. He said, "Do you want to help me get it ready? But you can't tell anybody." So we actually walked into the radio station one day with Radio Station in a Box and put K-Love on the air. And I went on the air with it while still working at Toby's.
Interesting.
And
so what did you do on air? Were you the on-air
I was just kind of a filling guy. And then one day another call came in from a gentleman named Buzz Bennett, who was a legendary radio programmer.
Yeah.
One of the top 40 guys in the nation. And he had just put on a radio station here called Y95.
Right.
And he said, why don't you come and work for me? I need somebody to come in and work in my marketing department, maybe do a little bit on air, which is how I met one of your other guests, Billy Burke.
Right.
And I worked with him for about a year and a half when he said to me, "Well, I want to send you to a legendary radio station, WAPE in Jacksonville, Florida, the Big Ape, which truly was legendary in the Southeast." And I went there, and I worked there for a couple of years, and Westinghouse recruited me. I came back to Dallas. After a little bit in Dallas working for Westinghouse as a program director, I was recruited by the gentleman who founded Home Shopping Network to come in as his corporate vice president. From there, I went to
So how did you make that transition, though,
companies.
from maybe marketing and on air to a corporate vice president at an organization like HSN? That's a huge operation.
It was actually Paxson Communications.
Okay.
But the way it happened was kind of interesting. I went to work for a group of radio stations in Orlando because they were paying me a lot of money and I wanted to do it. And so I went from Dallas to Orlando. The Dallas station had been sold by Westinghouse. So I was still being paid by Westinghouse as a consultant. But I went to Orlando, and I was there for about 2 weeks. And I called Bud Paxson, the founder of HSN. And I said, I think you're a really smart guy, and I've looked at your research, and I don't understand what you're doing unless you're buying these other radio stations. And he said, friend, I'll be over to see you in a very short period. And he came from the corporate office to see me, and he sat down with me, and he said, go pack your bag. You're my new corporate guy. Nice. And that's how I ended up with him. And
he was probably wondering how you knew that he was getting ready to make some
It was clear from the research that
right.
what he was doing didn't make any sense for the amount of money he was spending.
Right.
And then CBS recruited me, and the rest, as they say, is history.
So you mentioned the radio jingles with Toby, and voiceovers is a part of your current business. But were you also a voiceover talent?
Yeah, I have been most of my life. When I was with Toby, I was the national voiceover person for Benihana of Tokyo.
Oh, okay.
The Japanese steakhouse. I did a company called Jet America for many years. They were basically West Coast based, but I did Jet America for many years. I am currently the digital voice for Nelson's Greenbrier whiskeys.
Oh wow!
I've done quite a number of voiceover things, and so if you're an agent, I'm looking for one, and please send a check. I'm immediately available. So yeah, that was a big part of it, and it's kind of the only way I still keep my hand in the, that realm,
right.
In getting into the studio.
And that's really fascinating that you are still willing to not just be an executive and work CEO to CEO, but you're willing to get in the studio as well and participate in the day-to-day activities by doing voiceovers.
I love that stuff. Yeah. I love doing cartoon voices.
Keeps you connected.
Yeah, it does.
To the product.
It does. It also makes sure that I still have the cognitive abilities to be able to read aloud, which... you laugh about that, but as one gets older, it becomes more difficult to read aloud. Right. It just does, or at least it has for me.
I've been in studio, in a television studio, and following that prompter can be, it can be a lot of work. Just making sure you keep up with the speed, and you make sure you have a good teleprompter person, right? Who can track it at your pace.
When I did my first audition for an ABC affiliate years and years ago, I was, maybe 20 years old. And they put me behind the anchor desk. And so I started. And I was nervous to begin with, but I started. And I look up, and the teleprompter completely froze. And I had the copy in front of me. And I wanted to become ill. I really did. And I got through it. I did not do well. And I later found out that this station did that on purpose to see how the various candidates would react. I reacted poorly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating that would be a test.
We are all treacherous in the broadcast business.
Right. That's hilarious. Now, in our last program, we spoke about research by Nielsen.
Yeah.
And it caused me to think about a lot of the analytics that happens now from websites and other media sources today, social media. And we had a really delightful conversation. So Nielsen is really, in many respects, the gold standard for research on television. Google Analytics is doing a lot. Gallup is doing a lot. But for a company that is maybe in the entertainment industry, or a company that uses a lot of online social media and internet analytics, walk us through your thoughts on that analytics process and how companies use it and how companies can be more mindful on what the data means to them.
You've asked a very insightful question, and Nielsen is not only one of the top researchers and providers of audience estimates for television. They do the same thing for radio. They do the same thing for streaming. They do have a digital component to them. It's very involved. Google obviously has developed its own analytics. There are many companies that have developed various analytics, and everything has its place. In research, everything has a place. It is about the interpretation of data. What story does the data tell that can help my business that I think really matters? It doesn't matter if I know that a television program or has 6% of all of the viewers in the United States at any given time. That doesn't really matter to me. I want to know what those people are about. I want to know who they are from a lifestyle perspective, from their ability to spend, what they spend their money on, what they believe. I think that those things are all as important as the raw numbers. The problem with estimates, and all of the analysis tools are estimates, they only tell part of the story. And I think that can be dangerous, which is why I'm always so eager when a business owner says, hey, can you help me with this?
Right.
Not long ago, I was asked by a major city, one of the top 10 cities in America, their district attorney's office, to assist them as an expert witness in a case involving a major home renovation provider. Their case was that the home renovation provider had broken a law in their state, and they wanted to know how many people had seen the advertising of this company
that's interesting.
in their city,
right,
and in their county and in the state, and how many of those people were above the age of 18 and able to enter into a contract, but not just how many, but how many times they had seen it,
right,
what the potential for activation was. It was very, very involved. And when they sent it to me, I said, this information can't be right because there are over 1 billion impressions here.
Wow.
And then I spoke with the opposing counsel, and they said, yeah, we'll stipulate to that. Those numbers are correct. And I started to think, how does a marketer for that particular home renovation company, how do they really know what they're getting? They just know they're getting a lot.
Right.
So we began down the road of finding out not just who the audience was, but who the influencers were and who the super influencers are.
Right.
Because influencers don't make any real impact.
Okay.
They're there to influence people who are interested in the entertainment value of what they're seeing.
Sure.
Super influencers are the people who can get things done for a business. And I have a whole theory and what we consider a proprietary algorithm on who the super influencers are. But if you just take any kind of analytics at face value, you're probably asking the wrong questions. You're going to go down the wrong pathways.
Right.
And often, and this is not an indictment of young and inexperienced people. It's not. Because often they know a lot more than I do. But the reality is that they have a certain bias to certain kinds of media that they now relate well to. They don't relate any better to AM radio if you're 25 or under,
right,
than I would relate to the guy coming through the neighborhood with ice in the cart.
Right, right.
You know, it's really hard to imagine, but it wasn't that long ago that there were, as you say, only 3 or 4 choices in every media.
Right.
And today there are thousands. I don't know how many podcasts there are worldwide.
Well, there's only one that really counts. That's this one, right?
But what really counts, yes,
Right.
it certainly does. But what really counts is who's listening.
Sure, absolutely.
And the who's listening for you is very different than the who's listening for me.
Absolutely.
Because your business is podcast. My business is engaging people to hire me
Right.
to help them with their businesses.
Right. Now, and you're right, when you look at a lot of the data that's coming through on analytics, understanding unique users, because you can have 400 people and out of that 400, it could be 100 users that are unique, but they've been there several different times. And then the other thing that's happening now is the use of bots and paid clicks to increase the number of apparent users.
Let me tell you how easily manipulated that is. And yes, it is absolutely true that there are a lot of bots, but there are also a lot of humans that can
Sure.
manipulate. Without naming names or networks, about 2 years ago, maybe 3 now, we were approached by a showrunner of what was at that time a very popular television show that was produced by a major production company in Los Angeles. And the problem was that the show had been canceled by 2 different networks, but their story wasn't done.
Right.
It wasn't finished. And the showrunners wanted to finish it. Time was running out because the actors' contracts only extended through a certain day. And they said, we are at wit's end. We are trying desperately to get this onto a network or a streamer. Do you have any ideas? Just throw something against the wall. And so we got a bunch of very smart people together, and we said, we will create a groundswell of apparent viewers.
Wow.
And we will make everybody believe that this was the most popular show that was underrated by Nielsen in history.
Wow.
And we did, and they found their syndicate or their streamer, and they finished their story. Recently, another company came to us and asked us to do the same thing, and I said, we can't do it because everybody knows it's been done. They know what the manipulation was now.
Right.
They know how we did it. But unfortunately, and people will tell you, oh, that was very unethical. I don't know if it was unethical. It was good business for those
Sure.
guys.
Right.
And by the way, that show on that streamer had some of the biggest viewing that streamer had to date.
Interesting.
So it actually worked out for everyone.
Right.
But it was because we saw the flaw and said we can capitalize on
Right.
it and create business.
Well, it seems like they were undervalued to a degree, right? They hadn't
were.
hit an audience yet that really showcased what their capabilities were.
They hadn't been measured perhaps as well as they might have been.
Sure.
And that is not the fault of the company doing the measurement. It is the fault of what companies who produce these programs and air these programs are willing to pay for sample size.
Right.
Even in political campaigns, you'll see, campaigns there are polls that show, we had 5,250 people representing the entire nation. Okay.
Right.
And, maybe statistically that's true.
Right.
If it's my $5 million, I might not be comfortable with that.
Right. So we're at the end of our program, but I wanted to discuss briefly another related topic, and that's the use of AI. We spoke about bots and clicks and what you did for this one organization, but how is AI having an impact on the business, entertainment business, your business? Tell us your thoughts.
And boy, a lot of what I'm going to say is probably unpopular. So in the entertainment business, it certainly has had an impact on the people who produce the content. If I'm an actor, it is now possible for my likeness and my voice to be used for good, or it can be used for evil. Case in point, used for good, Randy Travis, who is one of the nation's treasures of country music, who is no longer able to perform to the ability that he once had because of a physical issue, a health issue. He recently released a brand new song that sure sounds like Randy Travis.
Interesting.
And they used sampling of his voice. They used another singer who was able to sing in his style, and then Randy's voice was put over it. It's a moving song. Used for evil, we see presidential candidates saying things that they never said. We see people like, big personalities. Taylor Swift suddenly endorsing a product she would never endorse.
Oh, wow.
These deep fakes by AI are very frightening.
Right.
It takes skilled people to do them right. There's a lot of AI that's done poorly. And I think that in many cases, especially when it comes to graphic AI, I think it still has a long way to come, and it is often being used by people who are under-talented or lazy or really pushed for time. And there are often issues with it. Students who are using AI to write term papers, they're likely to get caught.
Right. They are.
These applications for good and evil, it's just like any other technology. If you use it ethically and you use it to your benefit, it is a wonderful thing, and it will only grow and help not only the entertainment business, but every business. Used unrestrained, it could destroy us.
Right.
In the radio business right now, there are entire radio stations where they are being manned by an AI host.
Oh,
and it's somebody who has allowed their voice to be used for that purpose, and someone else creating the content using their voice. There's nobody there.
It looks like it's here to stay. I know in education they're using kind of a counter AI where when students submit their documentations, their research, it's going through this filter and it's determining the percentage that it's likely copied on the internet or some other source. So it's quite interesting what we're facing and the challenges that we'll see with AI. Bill, it's a pleasure having you back again. Your insight is incredible. I hope that other business leaders are able to take what you've given us from an information and insight perspective and use it to their benefit.
Well, I hope so too, and I thank you for allowing us to be here. And I truly believe that it is important to offer anyone that needs a little guidance the ability to get it, and I think that companies like ours can provide it, and a vehicle like this is important to get that word out because business is very tough.
It is.
It becomes tougher every day, not easier, and we all need friends in places where we need a little bit of information and support.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
And your information will be posted on our podcast so they can reach out to you and learn how to get your assistance. Thank you for joining us on Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you for listening to Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. Please be sure to subscribe and share and stay tuned for more incredible Business Decoded episodes.